Welcome back to the Deeper 2025 podcast. We're excited that you're with us today. We are now really moving through, and we're getting closer and closer to accomplishing the goal of reading through the whole Bible in a year. I hope you're continuing to read your Old Testament. I know we've focused a lot on the New Testament, and we're in the New Testament again today in Titus 2. And in Titus 2, Paul tells Titus to teach believers how to live in a way that honors God. Doesn't matter whether you're young or old, male or female, our lives should follow the pattern of Jesus and show a difference that Jesus brings into our life. We honor God because we are able to, because the Spirit of God lives inside of us. And that difference that Jesus brings to our life and the Holy Spirit brings to our life should show when we are out among other people. They should be able to see that. In Titus 2:7, he says, "In everything, make yourself an example of good works with integrity and dignity in your teaching." In other words, here's a phrase that I used to hear a lot when I was growing up. Your walk should match your talk. The way you live should match what we say we believe. Why do you think that is? Well, I know one huge thing that I think Paul wants to make sure Titus knows is that people are watching. People are watching you and me, especially if we claim Christ, especially if we claim that we're Christians. People are watching how we live, and so our walk has to match what we're saying. The way we live has to match what we're saying. Why? Because people will look at us as the example of who Christ is. Jesus would say, hey, you're an ambassador of mine. You're a disciple of mine. You're a follower of mine, which really means, and the word Christian means little Christ. And so let me ask you today, is your example one that if someone would see the way you live and you were to say, I am a little Christ, would they believe you? Or would they laugh at you? We have to be a good example. We have to live in such a way that our lives match up with what we believe. But we also are to teach and encourage others. Titus talks about how older believers should guide younger believers, and that everybody has this opportunity and this necessity that we grow in our faith. We're never there, but those of us who have been in the faith for a while and who are mature, listen, when he says older and younger, really, he's not talking about age there. He's talking about age in the faith. How long have you been in the faith, and how mature are you in the faith? And if you are mature in the faith, you should be finding someone who is not mature in the faith and bringing them up and teaching them and helping them to grow. But he also says in Titus 2 to live with self-control, that we've got to say no to sin and say yes to God. You and I have an opportunity every time temptation comes our way to say no to sin and yes to God. He says, don't say yes to sin and no to God. You say no to sin and yes to God. Now, when you sin and when you do give into that temptation, we also have to remember that the grace of God is there, that he's not sitting there in judgment of us, and he's not angry with us, and he's not looking just to strike you dead. But we should be learning to say no to sin and yes to God. And then the last thing I think in Titus 2 we see is that we wait for Jesus with purpose. We wait and we look for his return one day. Man, as you're a believer and a follower of Jesus, we should be anticipating and ready for Jesus to come back. Now, I hear what you're saying. BJ, I haven't accomplished everything in this life that I want to accomplish. I'm not ready for Jesus to come back. I've still got things to do. I've still got to have kids. I've still got to get married. I've still got to retire. I've still got to knock all the things off my bucket list. Friends, The greatest day in the world for the follower of Jesus is the day he comes back and takes us away from this world. We've got to be ready for it. We've got to be looking for it. And we've got to live like he's coming back today. Let me say that again. You should live like he's coming back today. Live as, I've heard this said, live as if today is your last day. And many times when people talk about that, they talk about the fact that life is short and you could die today. But I want to change your perspective on that. Live as if today is your last day on earth. Not because you're dying, but because Jesus could come back. That will change the way you live. That will change your perspective. It'll change your perspective in how you help others to grow, how you share your faith. It'll change your perspective and the example you need to be setting. It'll change your perspective in saying no to sin and yes to God. Living with the anticipation of Jesus' return will help you to be a better example to those around you of who Christ really is. And so today, in everything, make yourself an example of good works with integrity and dignity as you live your life.